Well, howdy. I'm going to try something new audio wise. Noticed that the last few videos I made produced some sound and it's coming from the computer. So I'm going to try the microphone and these doodads in my ears and we'll see if it comes out any better. So for those watching, I apologize. Wanted to cover something that's going to be related to the Sermon Sunday. I can't quite go into enough depth, but is of vital importance and it also systematically determines really much of how I interpret the Old Testament, especially the first few books up through this narrative up through the judges up to the kings and well, I mean even beyond that, but especially that portion of Jewish history, and that is related to the genocides of the Canaanites, which I think that's an appropriate term for it. They were wiped out, many of them, and rightfully so, because God ordered it. I'm not going to mince any words about that. Um, but what do we do with that? How do we understand it? There's primarily, there's a lot of places you can look, but there's two primary places to look in understanding God's orders to the Israelites and how they were to treat the Canaanites and really all the Ites in the land, and that's Deuteronomy 7 and Deuteronomy 20. I'm going to start with chapter 20. That's where my major interpretive understanding stems from, and that makes the understanding of chapter 7 clear. So if you're looking, verse 10, they're to offer peace to any city they come up against. Um, and what do you make of this? Is this to all cities or is this to only some cities? So, bottom line up front, I think it's to every single city. All of the ites that they come across, they're to offer peace. This is not the dominant view. Um, Although there are quite a few theologians throughout history who have thought so, it's not the dominant view. So, explaining this a little bit, how you're supposed to understand it, because as you move down, um, you get to verse 16, right? It talks about the cities that are near, and then that's different from the cities that are far off. Uh, and so a lot of people say, well, the cities that are near, the promised cities, you don't even offer them peace, you just wipe them all out. Well, I don't think that's what it's saying in verse 16. Uh, I think that's a misunderstanding of the structure, the paragraph structure, as it were. So if you're looking, verse 10, offer peace. Verse 11, if they open up to you, this is what you do. Verse 12, if they refuse to surrender, then this is what you do. You kill all the males, but you allow the females to live. This is if they refuse to surrender, right? Verse 16, fast forwarding just a little bit, but if they're part of the specific cities, these ones that are near, you don't save anyone. If they surrender to you, my interpretation, that's one thing. But if they don't surrender, then this one group, verse 12, you kill the males. This other group, verse 16, you kill everybody. So this is the distinction there. And then this informs, forgive me, I'm still a little bit congested, but chapter 7, rather, in 7, there's no mention of peace and none of this, but I think that's because chapter 7 starts out, verse 2, when you defeat them. This is chapter 7 is assuming that they didn't surrender. It's assuming that they would be besieged. It's assuming that the Lord has given them over. And if they surrender, if they refuse to surrender, the promise is that God will give them over if they are living the covenant, in the covenant the way they're supposed to. And then this immediately, hermeneutically, then informs, well, what do you do with Judges, the beginning of Judges? Because you have the book of Joshua, and it's really the realization of the blessing. So you have these blessings. If you do what I have told you to do, you will be blessed, and I will bless you in this way, and I'll bless you in this way. But if you don't do what I tell you, Deuteronomy, 28 and all of that, I will curse you. And so Joshua is the book of blessings. Judges is the book of curses, if you're thinking about it in broad categories. And Judges starts off in chapter 1. Well, they failed, so get ready, because here the curses come, and it gets worse and worse and worse as you go throughout. So how are we supposed to understand this, given what I just said? Because largely, especially the way people read it, well, they didn't drive everybody out. They didn't kill everybody. And my response is, well, yeah, that's not the problem. The problem is not that there's still Canaanites alive. Um, that's not the issue. There's a whole bunch I could go into. I'm not going to right now, but I mean, even you have the promises that God said He wouldn't drive them all out all at once. There's still work to be done. That's not the issue. The issue is how. It's why they're still around, and how the Israelites have treated them. Starting with the why, it's not because they haven't gotten there yet. It's not because they went around some group of people and they're going to come back to these later. It's not because they haven't even approached the city. It's because there's giants, or they have iron chariots, um, things like this. Well, okay, and you have God, iron chariots, God. I mean, that's not much of an excuse, my friends. And then it gets worse. The chapter 1 of Judges gets worse as you read throughout it. Um, Much the same way the entire book gets worse. First of all, their why is wrong, and then their how. Um, it's very clear in Deuteronomy. Even if they were to surrender, you don't just let them continue their life worshiping their gods and oh, they pay a little tribute. That's what the secular countries around them do. No, they are your slaves. Um, you abolish their culture completely, eradicate the culture. Even if they live, the culture cannot be allowed to survive. They are entirely subjugated to you. But that's not the case. They're just putting tribute. And in fact, it gets worse as they go. Not only are some of the Canaanites living among the Jews with their culture still intact, in some places it eventually gets to the point where, oh yeah, there's a few Jews that happen to be living among totally happy, thriving Canaanite culture. So the issue is not that the Canaanites are still alive and that they failed to kill every Canaanite in the whole land. Although if they had lived the law the way they were told to, I would dare say there wouldn't be many left in the land. But that's not the primary issue that's being highlighted in the text. The issue is that they didn't, that they were making excuses, and and two, that when they did accept peace, they didn't accept it the way they were told. Um, so anyway, and then this, as far as the sermon goes, I'm going to be talking about from Hebrews 11 and 29, talking about them coming out of Egypt, and then we immediately in verse 30 launch into Jericho. And well, what are we supposed to think about Jericho? Rahab living is not a breach of the law of God. Agag living was. Agag did not accept in faith and surrender and submit. He was allowed to live. And Samuel comes in and says, no, you cannot do this. You are breaking the law of God, and hacks him to pieces. How come there's no prophet of God coming in and hacking Rahab to pieces as a breach of God? And oh, by the way, obviously sanctioned by God, since that section of the wall that she lived in was not miraculously brought down by God. God allowed that portion, her house, to stand. You cannot. She's in the roll call of faith. You can't say that Rahab was an exception to God's law, or that God is inconsistent. If they surrendered, believed, and entirely submitted, and gave up everything about their previous identity, accepting God and God's people that was within the bounds, I believe, of the law that was given beforehand and how they're to treat the people. I think God is consistent. I think God is beautiful in the way that He offers this salvation. Whether there's historically there were not many that actually accepted, just as today narrow is the way, but the offer is there, and that's how I interpret and understand this scripture. Thank you.